Welcome to the reading of the Times Reporter newspaper for Monday, August the 10th. We begin today's reading with the area deaths. Carr F. Ashbaugh, 94, of New Philadelphia, died peacefully Friday, August 7th in his home following a period of declining health. The family will greet guests on Monday, August 10th from 6 to 8 in the Lynn Hurt Guy Funeral Home and Crematory at New Philadelphia. Pastor Brian Flood will lead a funeral service celebrating Carr's life in the funeral home's chapel on Tuesday at 11 a.m. Mary A. Dougherty, 69, of Minerva, passed away Sunday, August 2nd. A memorial service will be held Wednesday at 11 a.m. in the Finkfrock Gordon Funeral Home in Magnolia, with Pastor Kenny Thomas officiating. Face masks will be required. Evelyn K. Renner, age 78, of New Philadelphia, Ohio, passed away on Friday, August 7th. Per her wishes, there will be no calling hours or services. Constance J. Spring, otherwise known as Connie, 84, of Brooksville, Florida, died Sunday, August 2nd, at Brooksville Healthcare Center. Funeral services will remain private for the family. Ann E. White, 72, of North Canton, passed into heaven Friday, July 31st, after a 5-year courageous battle with cancer. There will be a private service for family and friends in the future. Theophilus Hoffner Jr., or Ted, 64, of Sugar Creek, died Friday, July 31st at his home following a brief illness. Public graveside services will be held on Saturday, August 15th at 11 a.m. at East Lawn Cemetery in Sugar Creek. Gregory A. Ripine, 63, passed away peacefully August 6th at Woodlawn Compassionate Care. A memorial service will be held at a later date due to COVID-19. That concludes the area deaths listed in today's online edition, so let's begin the first article. Tracking COVID, an inside look at outbreaks in Northeast Ohio meatpacking plants, by Alexander Thompson. This is part one of a 3-part series exploring coronavirus outbreaks that sickened hundreds of immigrant workers at meatpacking plants across Northeast Ohio. The investigation explores how the outbreaks started and their impact on local communities. A man pulled up at the Finn Feather Fur Outfitter near Canton on May 19th. He typically did not wear a mask, but this time he put one on. He was feeling unusually tired. 2 days later, the symptoms worsened. By the evening of May 22nd, the man had a fever and severe diarrhea. His sister called an ambulance, which rushed him to Altman Hospital. Before he was admitted, he was tested for the coronavirus. The next morning, a contact tracer with Canton City Public Health called him at the hospital and performed a 40-minute tracing interview with the man, whose name is redacted in the document describing the conversation, which was obtained through a public records request. The man worked the second shift at one of the Fresh Mark meatpacking plants in Stark County. As with hundreds of other meatpacking workers, the coronavirus test came back positive. 2 companies, Case Farms and Freshmark, previously announced outbreaks in their facilities but declined to release the number of cases. 2 outbreaks in Wayne County at Gerber's Poultry in Kidron and Ohio Farms Packing in Creston have gone unreported publicly. As of last week, data from local health departments showed that a minimum of 323 cases of coronavirus are linked to outbreaks in 7 meatpacking plants in Columbiana, Holmes, Stark, and Wayne counties. At least 31 workers were hospitalized and 3 died. Health officials and advocates alike regard these figures as undercounts due to the lack of testing available to workers in the early days of the outbreaks. A 3-month investigation involving interviews with dozens of key players, as well as the review of more than 2,000 pages of emails and reports obtained in a series of public records requests to local health departments, provides a clearer picture of the virus's path through the plants and its impact on the immigrant communities that provide much of the labor force for them. Though meatpacking plants were not the only workplace outbreaks that affected local immigrant communities, they certainly did not stay within factory walls. For example, the 21 confirmed or probable worker cases at Freshmark's plant in Canton spread the virus to at least 8 more non-workers, 3 of whom were hospitalized, according to Canton Health data. The Guatemalan community in Tuscarawas County and the Bhutanese refugee community in Summit County, from which many of the local meatpacking workers are drawn, have been hit disproportionately hard by the virus. According to data from the Ohio Department of Health, Latinos make up 3% of Tuscarawas County's population and account for 1/3 of its coronavirus cases and more than 1/3 of its hospitalizations. In Summit County, where Asian accounts for 4% of the hospitalization, they represent 15% of the cases and 10% of the hospitalizations. The virus arrives. Figures compiled on August 3rd by the Midwest Center for Investigative Reporting, which you can go to https://investigatemidwest.org, show that at least 34,200 positive cases of the coronavirus and 130 deaths have been linked to meatpacking plants across the United States. Northeast Ohio was not immune. The virus arrived in early April at Case Farms' sprawling Winesburg chicken processing facility nestled in a quiet valley deep in Holmes County, Amish country. The first worker at the plant contracted the coronavirus as early as April 6th, Ohio Department of Health investigators later determined. The virus appeared at Gerber Poultry in Kidron on April 14th, at Case Farms' Canton facility on April 25th, Ohio Farms Packing in Creston on April 26th, and at Fresh Marks factories in Canton and Massillon sometime in late April, early May, public records show. In some instances, the companies did not detect cases until weeks after the first ones were determined to have been present. State officials deemed food processors, such as meatpacking plants, essential businesses in their April 2nd stay-at-home order, allowing them to continue to operate. Meatpacking simply cannot be done remotely, said Lydia Garcia, a professor of meat science at Ohio State University. Transforming a live chicken into neatly packaged thighs, legs, or breasts require hundreds of workers on the plant's disassembly line. Spaces about 1.5 to 3 feet apart to rapidly slice and clean carcasses that whiz by at speeds of up to 140 a minute. Whether it's in a packing plant or it's an airport or an airplane, you run the risk of anything being spread, and that's just the reality of bringing large groups of people together, Garcia said. Fear swept through the factories when workers learned of the first positive tests. One Guatemalan worker in his 20s, who works in the packaging department of Case Farms' Winesburg facility, was one of the few employees to clock in on the morning of April 24th, the day after most workers heard about the first positive case. They got scared, and almost nobody showed up to work, he said in Spanish during an interview which was later translated. He asked that his name not be used for this story because he fears company retaliation. After an initial surge of infections in late April and early May, health department officials thought they had the outbreak under control by the middle of that month, but cases continued to develop well into June. Community spread. A majority of the Latino people have been infected. One shopkeeper of a Guatemalan grocery store in Dover said through a Spanish language interpreter, he spent 3 days on a ventilator himself and didn't want his store identified with the virus. Jeff Stewart, director of the Immigrant Worker Project in Canton, has spoken with more than 100 meatpacking workers affected by the pandemic. It had a severe impact on the immigrant community and not just on their health, he said. While some companies, such as Freshmark, paid their workers during quarantines, none of the workers with whom Stewart spoke have received quarantine pay and have instead spent vacation and sick time. Many of them are in the country on work permits and cannot rely on government support. Most families have had to find a way to survive without any help, Stewart said. That's what's happened to one middle-aged Guatemalan man who works at Gerber's Poultry. He said, through a Spanish interpreter, he used his vacation time in late April as the outbreak in the plant began, but just days after he returned to work, he was back in quarantine after carpooling to the factory with someone who had tested positive. The weeks of unpaid quarantine were tough on the man financially. He asks friends for money to make his rent. Gerber Poultry did not respond to repeated requests for comments. Cheryl Rieger, a Spanish interpreter in Tuscarawas County who has worked with the Guatemalan community for 30 years, saw the financial strain up close. The first consequence was they couldn't pay their bills. They couldn't pay their rent, she said. Rieger worked with a few friends to bargain with landlords, deliver food to those in quarantine, and answer questions about the disease. Elaine So, CEO of Asian Services in Akron, was dealing with similar issues in the city's North Hill Bhutanese community. She said 40 out of 110 tests of Asia's North Hill patients came back positive, though the organization does not have access to all testing data. That's still pretty high, she said. Chicken or the egg? The meatpacking companies say they are not to blame for the outbreaks. Case Farms, for example, is following all public health guidance, screening workers for symptoms and supplying ample personal protection equipment, according to a spokeswoman. At Freshmark, a spokeswoman said the company performs temperature checks twice a day, deep cleans common areas twice a day, and enforces social distancing and a mask protocol. A Canton City Health employee wrote in a June 2nd email that Case Farm managers believed that the workers were contracting the virus at home and bringing it into the plants. The immigrant meatpacking workers often live together in crowded, multi-generational households conducive to the spread of the virus. The number of people living together is high, so if one person in the family contracts the coronavirus, then basically the entire family is highly likely to contract the virus from their own family members, so said of the Bhutanese community. In addition, workers frequently carpool to work in large vans, sometimes for more than an hour. James Adams, the Canton City Health Commissioner, emphasized those factors in explaining the spread. There was some transmission taking place at the plant, he said, but definitely not the majority. Stewart and some members of Adams' department point to evidence that diverges from that conclusion. So many cases were coming from the plants so consistently, and in some cases, entire lines or departments at some plants would fall sick at the same time, Stewart said. It seems hard to believe that's not occurring at work, as well as getting to work and within the community, he said. In early June, Diane Thompson, Canton City Public Health Director of Nursing, looked at the 43 Stark County households with a positive case associated with the outbreak at Case Farms' Canton facility. Only 3 had more than one worker with a positive test. So while many positives were linked to the factory, few homes had multiple worker cases. I think the argument could be made that Case Farms has transmission issues, and Canton City is doing an awesome job educating our residents on isolation and disease prevention in the household, Thompson wrote her colleagues in an email. A challenging response. The outbreaks at meatpacking plants are among the largest health departments have dealt with during the pandemic. Emails from the Tuscarawas County and Canton Health Departments show the painstaking process of tracing the plant outbreaks. Most people who tested positive worked and lived in such close proximity to others that the lists of potential contacts were long. We were slammed with cases and Case Farm contacts, an office manager enlisted to help conduct contact tracing at Canton Health wrote to a colleague on June 10th. I probably have 30 sitting on my desk that need called. The contact lists sent by companies often were riddled with disconnected numbers and incorrect names. When tracers did get through, an interpreter typically was necessary because many workers speak very little English. An HR manager at Gerber's wrote to a Tuscarawas County nurse on May 12th about a conversation with a Guatemalan woman. When we were able to speak with her, she gave the phone to someone else to translate because she only speaks a Guatemalan dialect. When they called back, the line was dead. Our next article reads, Zoar Village gets a national spotlight thanks to an Amazon cooking show by Dan Kane. A Taste of History is streaming on Amazon Prime. While he traveled all over the world filming the TV cooking series A Taste of History, Chef Walter Stabe had a personal eagerness to visit historic Zoar Village. It was especially meaningful because the initial settlers from Zor came from right near my neighborhood in Germany in the Black Forest, Stabe, a native of Germany now based in Philadelphia, said in a telephone interview Wednesday. The actual experience in Zor really blew my mind, Stabe said about filming in the village. Just everything. The people, the gardens so beautiful, everything immaculately kept, and such a dynamic story behind it. The 25-minute episode of A Taste of History that showcases Zor is part of the cooking show, part history lesson and part travelogue, beautifully filmed last September with aerial shots of the village. The Experiment in Zor is available for viewing on Amazon Prime as the 10th episode of the series' 11th season. In the show, Stabe, who has special interest in 18th century cuisine, prepares several traditional German dishes in the kitchen of Zor's #1 house. While cooking, the chef said Spätzle represents motherhood and apple pie in the Black Forest, and describes Gaisberg Marsh as one of my soul foods. These were dishes I've never made on Taste of History. They never would have applied to other episodes, Stabe said. I was excited to show the common folks food, not upscale, but really what the people would have eaten there. The recipes can be found in Black Forest Cuisine, one of the 7 cookbooks Stabe has authored, copies of which are available at the Zor store. Helping him out in the kitchen on camera is Michelle Hallman, who does period cooking as a docent at Schönbrunn Village. Michelle was really helpful and had a lot of insight, Stabe said. Stabe is given a demonstration on making Zor pretzels by Nancy Wyatt, a Zor descendant. Zor tinsmith Todd Morris shows Stabe how to make a tin angel. Tin was the Tupperware of the 18th century kitchen, Stabe said. Sharing history with Stabe about Zor, founded in 1817 by German religious dissenters, is John Elsasser, president of the Zor Community Association and owner of the now closed Canal Tavern of Zor, seen in the episode. They came in from Philly on a Sunday in mid-September. There were 5 of them. They bought some of the cooking gear they needed and some of the food, Elsasser said about the Taste of History crew. The weather was beautiful. They filmed all day on Monday and a little bit more on Tuesday. I thought they did a good job. A Taste of History has won 15 Emmy Awards to date and just received 6 2020 Emmy nominations. Elsasser said it was a writer for German Life magazine, Robert Seelig, who recommended Zor to Stabe for A Taste of History. Seelig was a speaker at the Zor Bicentennial in 2017. COVID-19 caused 2 cancellations of 2 major 2020 events, the Zor Mayfest and Harvest Festival Antique Show. Christmas in Zor, held the first weekend in December, will proceed this year. We're going to focus more on exterior decorating of the village and outdoor music to at least get people to come down and walk around, Elsasser said. Tourism continues in the village, with groups kept to 10 people or less and tours changed to emphasize things outside. With the really small buildings, we couldn't get people in safely, Elsasser said. The bakery is open and selling baked goods. The Zor store is open with social distancing. Every day we get visitors, he said. It's certainly not what it would be in a regular year, but not a total disaster. Up next, bond set at $250,000 for Philadelphia man in a child's sexual abuse case by Lee Morrison. Jason D. Monaco, 45, of New Philadelphia, faces 3 sex-related charges involving a juvenile, according to Detective Lieutenant Jeff Moore of the Tuscarawas County Sheriff's Office. Bond was set at $250,000 for Monaco at his initial arraignment in New Philadelphia Municipal Court on Friday. The Sheriff's Detective Bureau completed an investigation of allegations of sexual abuse of a child, with the offenses occurring over a period of time when the child was ages 8 to 16 years old. Detectives obtained an arrest warrant for 1 count of rape, a first-degree felony. 1 count of gross sexual imposition, a third-degree felony, and sexual imposition, a third-degree misdemeanor. Monaco was taken into custody on Thursday and remains incarcerated in the Tuscarawas County Justice Center in New Philadelphia. Detectives and the Tuscarawas County Prosecutor's Office are working on the case. Well, our next article, Harrison County Bee Association to hold August meeting at Bowerston Park, by Jackie Humphrey. The Harrison County Bee Association will hold its August meeting at the Bowerston Community Park on Saturday, August 15th. The building will be open and available in case of inclement weather. There will be plenty of room for social distancing, but please bring your masks. Extras will be available if needed. Individuals and families with children are welcome. As always, information on beekeeping will be shared and questions answered for those who may be interested in beekeeping as a hobby. There is no cost to attend this event. The usual potluck will not be held at this meeting, but please bring your own beverages. A discount on Kristen Trainor's quarterly magazine, 2 Million Blossoms, is offered for those joining the club. It is a great informative magazine. The Bee Association would like everyone to be aware that some Ohioans have been receiving seed packets in the mail that may be an invasive species and urge people to turn these over to the Ohio Department of Natural Resources instead of planting. No prior knowledge or experience with beekeeping is necessary to join in on the fun. Any questions can be directed to Mike Shepperson at 330-204-3286. Well, moving on again to our next article. Tuscarawas County construction projects to affect highways. Construction projects on Interstate Highway 77 and State Route 516 will affect highways in Tuscarawas County in August. Northbound traffic on I-77 will be restricted to one lane at 6 p.m. August 10th near Bolivar. The closure will allow a contractor to place structural steel on the northbound bridge structure located over State Route 212. Work is expected to last several hours, weather permitting. Route 516 will close during daytime hours from August 17th to August 21st between State Route 93 and County Road 73 for culvert replacements. And we're coming to our end for the day with our crime reports. In Tuscarawas County, a resident of St. Jacobs Ridge Road Southwest, Stone Creek, on Thursday reported a breaking and entering. Taken were 2 ATVs, tires, and rims. A resident of North Main Avenue in Tuscarawas reported Thursday that someone stole a battery and a 24-foot aluminum extension ladder from his boat sometime in the past 2 days. A resident of East Arch Street, Port Washington, reported Thursday that she was assaulted by her boyfriend. Deputies located a man walking along State Route 800 Northeast in Dover with an open can of beer on late Wednesday. He was wanted by Dover police for involvement in a domestic dispute. A resident of 2nd Street Northeast Magnolia reported Wednesday that she was assaulted by her husband, who threw a package of hamburger meat at her head while she was sitting on the toilet. A report will be sent to the prosecutor for review. In Twin Cities, a resident of the 500 block of Logan Street, Denison, was arrested Thursday for domestic violence. In Newcomerstown, police investigated a report Monday of vandalism on East Canal Street. Well, friends, this concludes the reading of the Times Reporter for Monday, August 10th. As you know, my name is Pam, and while I'm not a fan of bees, I want to close by saying, be happy, be safe, be well, and behave, and most of all, be blessed.